Have you ever sat in a room full of family and felt like a stranger? That's what I felt. The day my daughter-in-law looked at me and said, "You're just a burden," I thought I was family. That day I realized I was just their wallet. It was a warm Sunday afternoon, but my hands felt cold. The air smelled faintly of roses, but it tasted bitter in my mouth. I sat at the table watching my son's fiancée, my future daughter-in-law, laugh and plan the wedding I was paying for. And I realized I wasn't invited. I was tolerated. Then in the middle of her excitement, she glanced at me, and with a voice sweet as sugar but sharp as a blade, she said, "Stay in your lane. You're just here to help, not to control." The room went quiet. My hands resting on the table trembled just enough for me to feel it. My son looked away, like he didn't hear it. Or maybe he didn't want to. I took a slow breath, steadying my voice. I wanted to shout to remind them of every meal I cooked, every dollar I saved, every night I stayed up worrying for them. But I didn't. I just smiled. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't the end. Not for me, because they had no idea what I was about to do next. My name is Eleanor. I'm 68 years old. I raised my son Jason mostly on my own after his father passed, when Jason was just 12. Life wasn't easy, but I did what I had to do. Double shifts at the hospital, night shifts at the diner on weekends. I scrimped. I saved. And every penny went toward giving Jason the best future I could. I helped him through college, paid off his student loans when he couldn't. When he married, I gave them a down payment for their first home, $35,000, straight from my retirement savings. I didn't think twice. Family comes first. That's what I believed. His wife, Lisa, came into our lives with a sparkle. She was charming in that way that makes you want to like her, even if something feels off. The first time I met her, she brought me a jar of homemade jam. "From my family's farm," she said with a sweet smile. I noticed the way she always touched Jason's arm when she spoke, how her laugh filled the room like she owned it. At first, she called me Mom, and I liked that. But over time, the mom turned into Eleanor, and then into nothing at all. Her eyes would glaze over when I spoke as if my words were just background noise. I started hearing little comments, subtle, almost whispered, when she thought I wasn't paying attention. "She's too much. Always in our business. Or worse. She's just a burden now." One evening, I overheard them in the kitchen. Lisa's voice low but sharp. "Once the wedding's over, we'll have everything we need. She'll go back to her own place." Jason's reply was a quiet sigh. No protest. I felt my hands grow cold, my breath catch. My heart clenched tight in my chest. That moment stayed with me like a splinter under the skin, aching every time I moved. But I didn't let them see it. I smiled. I offered to help with the wedding. "Just tell me what you need." They needed money, of course. $15,000 for the venue, catering, flowers, the dress. I offered it, no questions asked. It felt like the right thing to do. At the time, Lisa's gratitude. A quick, tight smile and a distracted, "Thanks, Eleanor." She didn't even look up from her phone. That night, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering, how did I get here? From being their rock, their support to this quiet, invisible presence in my own family. And yet, as I stared into the dark, I realized something. They might think I'm just a burden, but they forgot there are some things only I can control. It happened one Sunday afternoon, the kind of day that should have felt warm like a family gathering. But instead, it felt like walking into a room where the air had gone stale. Jason had invited me to a wedding planning brunch. Lisa had taken over the entire living room, her laptop open on the coffee table, fabric swatches spread everywhere, Pinterest boards up on the big TV. It felt like I was stepping into someone else's life, and I wasn't sure I belonged. I sat on the couch quietly sipping my tea as they argued over linen colors and chair rentals. I offered a gentle suggestion, maybe something simple, elegant, like blue hydrangeas for the centerpieces. Lisa paused, looked at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and said, "Eleanor, maybe just let us handle the decisions. We want a more modern look, blue hydrangeas feel. A bit dated, you know." The words hung in the air, polite enough for company, but sharp enough to cut. I swallowed the sting. But then it happened. Lisa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and muttered under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear. Honestly, I wish she'd stop meddling. She's just a burden at this point. The word burden, it hit like a slap. My breath caught in my throat. My hand trembled so slightly that the tea in my cup rippled. Jason didn't say a word. He just kept scrolling through the guest list, pretending he hadn't heard. That was the part that hurt the most. Not Lisa's words, sharp as they were, but Jason's silence. I stared at him, waiting for some kind of defense, some flicker of loyalty, but there was nothing. Just the click of a mouse, the sound of my heart cracking bit by bit. I excused myself, my voice barely steady, and stepped into the kitchen. My fingers clutched the edge of the counter, knuckles white. I tried to steady my breath, but my chest felt tight, like I couldn't quite get the air in. That night as I drove home, the word burden echoed in my mind. I thought about the $15,000 wedding fund money they assumed was theirs. It wasn't. It was still in my account. They wanted my money, but they didn't want me. And I realized I was the one holding the purse strings. That realization sat heavy in my chest. But it wasn't sadness. It was something sharper, more focused. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to fight. But I was going to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I made my coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sun rise over the garden. The roses I'd planted last spring were in bloom, soft pink, against the morning light. They reminded me of my mother, who always told me a mother's love is quiet, but it's not weak. I thought about that as I watched Lisa's Instagram stories later that day. Pictures of venue tours, captions like, "Can't wait for our big day. Thankful for all the support." Her fingers laced through Jason's, both of them, smiling, radiant happy. They thought they were in control. They thought they had me wrapped around their little fingers. But they didn't know. I was quietly preparing my own story, and just like that, the pieces started falling into place. That night after the phone calls stopped, and the house settled into silence, I sat in my living room. Lights dimmed the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound. My fingers traced the edge of my teacup, smooth and cool. I thought about the word burden, how it clung to me like a stain I couldn't scrub away. But then something shifted. They thought they'd cornered me. But I realized they had left the door wide open. I thought about the $15,000 wedding fund money they assumed was already theirs. It wasn't. It sat untouched in my account, every dollar earned from years of saving coupon clipping, saying no to things I wanted so I could give to them. And they didn't even bother to ask. They expected. I sat with that thought, letting it settle into my bones. They expected, and suddenly I didn't feel so small anymore. I remembered the times Lisa made those offhand comments at family dinners. "Oh, Eleanor's just here to help with the cleanup." Or the way she would glance at Jason, eyebrows raised, when I tried to offer advice, like I was a relic from another time. The truth is, I had been waiting for permission to stand up. But that night I realized I didn't need anyone's permission to take my power back. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and stared at the balance. $15,000. Sitting there, waiting. For a moment, I hovered over the transfer button. My heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat of something I hadn't felt in years control. But I didn't press it. Not yet. I wanted them to feel it first. The next morning, I baked a batch of lemon bars, Lisa's favorite, ironically, and brought them over to the house. She greeted me with that sugary, sweet smile, the one that said, "Thanks, but we don't really need you here." I set the tray down and smiled back. "Just thought I'd bring a little something by," I said. She barely glanced up from her phone. "Oh, that's sweet of you, Eleanor. The tasting appointment is at 3 tomorrow, by the way. Don't be late. We'll need you to write the deposit check." The assumption in her voice, it was sharp enough to draw blood. I smiled wider, and in that moment I knew I wasn't writing a single check. That night I sat in bed and started making a list. Not a list of what they needed, but what I had done. I paid for Jason's braces when he was 12. Covered his first car payment. Cancelled my own vacation to help with their mortgage. Took care of their dog when they went on trips. Babysat their kids every other weekend. And now the wedding fund. I realized I wasn't a burden. I was the foundation they had built their lives on. And they were about to learn what happens when you take your foundation for granted. The following week, I kept showing up like nothing had changed. I attended tastings, listened to floral arrangements, nodded at cake designs. Lisa barely acknowledged me, but I was there quietly watching. Every time she mentioned the fund, I just smiled and nodded. And all the while, the money sat untouched in my account. Then came the day she called me in a flurry. Venue deposit due, florist needing payment, caterer, expecting a check. I let the call go to voicemail. Her voice was clipped, frustrated. "Eleanor, we really need that deposit today. Don't mess this up." "Oh, sweetheart, you already did." I stared at my phone, the screen lighting up with her name, over and over. Jason called once, then twice, his voice quieter, more hesitant in his message. "Hey, Mom. Lisa says we really need the money today. Can you take care of that?" Not, "Can we talk about it?" Not, "Thanks for all you've done." Just, expectation. That's when I knew. I wasn't just funding their wedding. I was funding their entitlement. And it stopped now. Sometimes the best way to teach someone a lesson is by showing them what life looks like without you. So I made my decision, quietly, calmly. I transferred the $15,000 to a different account. My own, locked and untouchable. I sat back, a strange warmth blooming in my chest. Not bitterness, not revenge, just clarity. They thought they had me in checkmate. They didn't know I had the last move all along. For the next few days, I played the role they expected me to play. Smiling, nodding, showing up when asked. Lisa would hand me papers to sign, lists to review always, with that air of assumed control. She had no idea that while she was planning floral arrangements and canapes, I was quietly building my own strategy. They thought I was just another piece on their wedding board. But I was holding the queen. Every evening I sat at my dining table with a notebook. A simple, worn notebook lined pages corners, curled from years of use. I started making lists. But not like the lists Lisa had me making. This was my ledger. Page 1. What I've given. I wrote down every dollar I had invested in Jason's life. The $35,000 a down payment on their house. The emergency car repair when Jason was laid off. The countless weekends I spent babysitting. The groceries I stocked their fridge with when they were short. The $15,000 wedding fund money I had been too quick to offer, too eager to help. Page 2, what they gave in return. Silence. Dismissal. That word burden. I underlined it 3 times, and then I started writing my plan. Step 1. Control the money. I'd already moved the $15,000 into my personal savings, locked safe out of their reach. Step 2, wait for the moment. I wasn't going to tell them. I wanted them to feel it. The panic, the realization, the silence that fills a room when someone finally understands they're not as clever as they thought. Sometimes the best lesson isn't told, it's felt. Step 3, Decide my boundaries. No more help without respect. No more writing checks while they treated me like an afterthought. If they wanted my support, they'd have to treat me as family, not a convenience. Step 4. Let them make the first move. I wasn't going to pick a fight. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to watch. And I was going to listen. The first sign came on a Wednesday morning. My phone buzzed. Lisa. Hey, Eleanor. Quick thing, can you send over the payment for the caterer? They're asking for it by Friday. Her voice was light casual, like we were girlfriends swapping recipes. I paused for a beat. Then I said, "Oh, I thought Jason was handling that." Silence. A tight laugh. Well, we assumed it would be coming from the fund. That word. Assumed. It always starts there, doesn't it? I kept my voice even. I'll have to check on that. The next day, Jason called. His voice was softer, almost careful. Hey, Mom. Lisa said you were going to handle the deposit for the venue, too. I could almost hear the hesitation, the edge of worry. I smiled even though no one could see. Jason, I've been thinking a lot about what Lisa said the other day. About me being a burden. He went quiet. I let the silence stretch, let it settle into the space between us like fog. Then I said I just don't want to overstep, you know. Maybe it's better if you both handle the finances yourselves. I wouldn't want to meddle. The pause on the other end. It was the sound of a man realizing the ground wasn't as steady as he thought. Lisa texted me later that night. Just one line. We need to talk. I didn't reply. Instead, I baked another batch of lemon bars and dropped them off at the house, smiling sweetly at Lisa when she opened the door. Oh, she said, her smile brittle. Thanks. I nodded. I hope they help sweeten the day. I turned and walked away, and I could feel her eyes on my back. That's when I knew the panic had started to settle in. And I wasn't done yet. The next few days were a flurry of quiet chaos. I could see it in Jason's tight shoulders, in Lisa's clipped tone. They tried to keep up appearances, but the cracks were showing. They called the florist no payment. The caterer nothing yet. The venue deposit overdue. And me, I kept showing up with a smile and a plate of baked goods. They thought they were orchestrating the wedding of their dreams. But I was the quiet hand, pulling the strings all along. Jason showed up at my door, shoulders hunched, Lisa close behind. Her arms were crossed tight, lips pressed thin like she was holding back an explosion. Eleanor, we need to talk. Lisa started, her voice strained but laced with that practiced sweetness. I gestured toward the table. We sat. Lisa didn't waste time. Eleanor, we've already put down deposits. The venue, the florist, the caterer, they're all waiting. We can't just cancel everything. That wouldn't be fair. I held my cup, feeling the warmth seep into my palms, steady and calm. Fair, I echoed, voice soft but sharp. Jason cleared his throat, a quiet plea. Mom, please. We didn't mean to make you feel like a burden. I met his eyes steady and unflinching. You didn't make me feel like a burden, Jason. You called me one, and you let her call me that too. Lisa's face flushed. It wasn't like that. You misunderstood. No. I cut in. My voice was quiet but firm. I heard every word. And I've heard enough. I set my cup down. The wedding fund is gone. I'm not paying for the venue, or the flowers, or the cake. This is your wedding, your problem. Jason's shoulders sagged, the weight of reality settling in. Lisa stared, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't quite process what she was hearing. But we counted on you, she whispered, barely audible. I let the silence fill the room. Then I spoke clear and final. You counted wrong. Lisa pushed back her chair, standing abruptly. Jason followed, slower eyes darting to me as if searching for a lifeline. I gave him none. They left without another word. The door clicked shut behind them. I sat back, exhaling slow and deep, the air feeling lighter than it had in years. For the first time, I wasn't the one picking up the pieces, And for the first time in years I felt at peace. The days that followed were strangely quiet. No more calls, no more texts. Just a tense, lingering silence like the air before a storm. I could feel it coming. A week later, Jason showed up again, this time with Lisa by his side. She stood, tall arms crossed, the corner of her mouth pulled into a tight, practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Jason looked tired, weighed down, like the responsibility of holding it all together was finally sinking in. I invited them in, offering tea, but Lisa declined with a wave of her manicured hand. She went straight to the point. "Eleanor, we've been talking, and we think it's only fair that you reconsider the wedding fund. It's not just about us. It's about family, about the future. We've put down deposits, made commitments, and frankly, it feels a bit unfair that you would back out now." Her words were measured, rehearsed. She was trying to stay calm, to sound reasonable, but I could hear the sharp edge behind them. I set my teacup down on the table, the sound quiet but deliberate. "Unfair," I repeated, letting the word hang there heavy in the room. Jason shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Lisa, then at me. Lisa continued, her voice rising ever so slightly. "It's a matter of respect, Eleanor. You can't just dangle the fund in front of us and then pull it away. That's manipulative." I felt a slow warmth rise in my chest. Not anger, but a strange, calm certainty. "Respect," I said quietly. "That's an interesting word, Lisa. Let's talk about that, shall we?" I leaned back in my chair, my hands folded in my lap. My voice stayed even, but there was no mistaking the firmness in my tone. Respect is earned. It's not a transaction. It's not something you demand after dismissing me as a burden. Lisa's face flushed, her mouth opening in protest. But I raised my hand slightly and she stopped. "Let me finish." Jason sat rigid, his eyes darting between us like a man caught in the middle of a chess match, realizing too late that the board had shifted. "I have been silent for a long time," I said, my voice steady. "I have helped, supported, and given, without asking for anything in return. But when I overheard you, Lisa, calling me a burden, when I saw Jason sit there in silence, letting it happen, that changed something for me." I could see Lisa's jaw clench, her fingers tightening on the back of the chair. "You both expected my support. Assumed it even. But respect isn't something you get just because you want it. And love isn't a blank check you can cash whenever it suits you." Jason finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, please, can't we just move on from this?" I looked at him. My son, the boy I had raised, the man I had helped build, and I saw the exhaustion in his face, the weight of choices made too quickly, the burden of entitlement he hadn't realized he was carrying. "No." "Jason," I said gently, "we can't move on like nothing happened. Actions have consequences. You both made choices. You chose to treat me as a burden, to expect my money, without my presence, to plan a wedding with my fund, but not my voice. And now you're facing the results of those choices." Lisa opened her mouth, her voice sharp, but I cut her off before the first syllable could escape. "The wedding fund is gone. I won't be paying for the venue, the catering, or the flowers. That's your responsibility now." Jason exhaled a low, defeated breath. Lisa's voice cracked, her words tumbling out in a tight whisper. "You'll ruin everything. We've already put down deposits, the guest list, the venue." I met her gaze, unflinching. "No, Lisa," I said softly. "I'm not ruining anything. I'm simply stepping back and letting you handle what you said you could. It's your wedding, your plans, your choices. And now, your problem." Jason's hands dropped to the table, palms flat, as if grounding himself. His voice was quiet, almost broken. "I didn't think it would come to this. It didn't have to." I said, my tone gentle but firm. But when you choose to treat someone like an afterthought, don't be surprised when they stop showing up. Lisa stood abruptly, grabbing her purse, her movements sharp and rigid. Jason followed a step behind his shoulders, hunched. They left without another word, the door closing behind them with a hollow click. I sat in the quiet for a long while, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space where their voices had been. I took a sip of my tea, letting it warm me from the inside out. The weight that had pressed on my chest for so long felt lighter, like I had finally set it down and walked away. I looked at the clock on the wall. It ticked forward unbothered, as if to say, "Life moves on, Eleanor." And I knew it did, because for the first time in a long time I had taken back what was mine. Not just the money, but my voice, my boundaries, my place in this family. And I wasn't going to give it up again. Not for a wedding, not for anyone. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after they left. The quiet filled the space like a warm blanket, and I found myself breathing easier than I had in months. I looked around the room, my home, my sanctuary, and felt a strange, unfamiliar peace settle over me. For years I had been so busy giving that I forgot how it felt to simply be. To sit with my own thoughts, sip my tea without a to-do list buzzing in the back of my mind. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for far too long. I picked up the notebook still sitting on the table, flipping back through the pages. My lists, my boundaries, my quiet plan. I let my fingers rest on the word I had underlined over and over: boundaries. I had drawn a line and I had kept it. I stood moving to the window, watching the early evening settle over the neighborhood. Kids were playing in a yard across the street, their laughter drifting through the air. A neighbor watered her roses, the hose glinting in the fading sun. Life was happening all around me, steady and unbothered. And I was still here. I thought about Jason and Lisa, about the wedding, the deposits, the phone calls they would now have to make, the apologies they would have to deliver. It wasn't my burden to carry anymore. For so long, I believed that love meant sacrifice without question, that being a mother meant bending over backward, even when it hurt, even when it cost me pieces of myself. But that wasn't love. That was enabling. True love, I realized, has limits. It has respect. I thought about the next chapter of my life not as someone's emergency fund or problem solver, but as a woman who had quietly, steadily reclaimed her own dignity. I poured another cup of tea, the soft clink of the spoon, grounding me in the moment. The bitterness of the situation lingered, sure, but it didn't define me. I thought about my garden, the roses blooming out back. I thought about the trips I'd put off the books, gathering dust on my shelves, the simple joys I had delayed in the name of family. No more. I wasn't going to sit in the shadows of my own life anymore. I picked up the phone and called a friend I hadn't seen in years, Helen. We used to go on day trips together before life got in the way. When she answered, her voice warm and familiar, I smiled and said, "How about we take that trip we always talked about? Just us." Her delighted laughter filled the line, and I felt something inside me soften, a knot unraveling. I wasn't too old to make new memories. I wasn't too late to start fresh. I wasn't a burden. And as I sat back down, notebook still open, I wrote one more thing in bold letters at the bottom of the page. "I am enough." Jason called again a few days later. I let it ring, then checked the voicemail later. His voice was quieter this time, unsure. "Mom, I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner. I didn't know it was going to go this far. Can we talk?" I smiled softly, a tear slipping down my cheek. Not from sadness, but release. I wasn't in a rush to call back. For once the ball was in my court. If they wanted to rebuild, they would have to come to me. Not with demands, not with expectations, but with genuine respect. And I would decide if I had the space for that. The story didn't end with a perfect family reunion or a dramatic apology over coffee. It ended with me choosing myself. It ended with quiet, with peace, with a deep, steady knowledge that I had taught them and myself the most important lesson of all. Love without respect is not love. Support without gratitude is not support. And no one has the right to treat you like a burden when you've carried them for years. Have you ever been treated like a burden in your own family? Tell me in the comments what would you have done in my place. Let's share our stories, build each other up and remind the world. No one deserves to feel invisible. If you felt this too, hit like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. You are not just a helper. You are enough. And when you stand up for yourself, you inspire others to do the same. Tomorrow I'll be sharing another story, a quiet revenge that unfolded at a retirement party. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Until then, be kind to yourself. You're stronger than you know.